In today's video, we're uncovering 5 chilling stories of thrill seekers who pushed the limits and never came back. From a skydiver who plummeted to her death, to a cyclist whose final ride ended just short of triumph, these are the haunting real-life tales where the pursuit of greatness came at the cost of lives. It was April 3, 2014. In the vast expanse of the Arizona sky, 222 bodies hurtle through the air at over 100 miles per hour, a kaleidoscope of colors against the desert backdrop. The roar of wind drowns out everything as these human puzzle pieces begin to connect, hands gripping wrists, forming an intricate aerial pattern. Among them is Diana Paris, a 46-year-old German woman from Berlin, her face set with determination behind her goggles. Diana wasn't just another skydiver. With 1,500 jumps under her belt, she was a veteran of the skies, someone who understood the delicate dance between freedom and danger that came with every leap from 18,000 feet. Her husband would later tell police that skydiving wasn't just her hobby, it was her passion, her escape, her way of touching something beyond the ordinary constraints of life. That day in Eloy, Arizona, Diana joined 221 other skydivers from 28 different countries. They had gathered at Skydive Arizona, one of the most renowned facilities in the United States, with a singular purpose: to break the world record for the largest formation jump. The plan was ambitious yet precise: jump from multiple aircraft, form 2 different patterns in freefall, then safely deploy their parachutes. The preparation had been exhaustive. For 18 months, the world team had trained, calculated, and rehearsed every aspect of this dangerous ballet. Each jumper knew their position, their grip points, their timing. The oxygen masks they wore at the high-altitude jump were a reminder of just how far they were pushing human limits. At elevations above 15,000 feet, oxygen levels drop significantly, making it nearly impossible to stay conscious, let alone skydive, without supplemental oxygen. As Diana exited the aircraft that morning, everything felt right. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, minimal wind. The first formation came together smoothly, bodies linking in perfect synchronization. Then came the break, the moment to reposition for the second formation. That's when something went terribly wrong. Diana reached for her ripcord to deploy her main parachute. There was a jerk, a flutter of fabric, but immediately she could tell something wasn't right. The parachute was malfunctioning, failing to open properly. In skydiving, time is measured in heartbeats, in split-second decisions that separate life from death. Diana deployed her main parachute, adhering to emergency procedures. However, the release occurred perilously close to the ground, leaving insufficient altitude for the reserve chute to deploy effectively. While the other skydivers floated gently to the ground with their parachutes, Diana kept falling fast, resulting in a fatal impact. Immediately at 7:42 a.m., just minutes after the fall, authorities responded to the call. Diana Paris was declared dead at the scene, her body having impacted the desert floor with devastating force. The skydiving community, a tight-knit family of thrill seekers and adventurers, was shattered by the news. The investigation would later confirm what many suspected: the accident was not due to human error or weather conditions. It was a rare equipment malfunction, a reminder that even with 1,500 jumps of experience, the sky remains an unforgiving place for those who dare to dance with gravity. In the skydiving world, they say you're never truly gone if people still jump in your memory. In the days that followed, the world team gathered, tears mixing with resolve. They decided to continue their record attempt, but with one significant change. Instead of a 222-way formation, it would be a 221-way formation. Diana's slot would remain empty, a missing piece in their aerial puzzle, a tribute to their fallen friend. With its single, poignant absence, Diana Paris continued to soar. It was July 22, 2014. The air in Pago Pago, American Samoa, was thick with salt and anticipation. Haris Suleiman stood beside his Beechcraft Bonanza, a 36, checking the final pre-flight details with his father, Babar. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, painting the Pacific sky in hues of orange and indigo. This was the penultimate leg of their record-breaking attempt to fly around the world in 30 days. A mission rooted in purpose, adventure, and love, Harris, just 17, climbed into the cockpit, focused and calm. Minutes later, the aircraft lifted off into the dark, vast sky. But barely after takeoff, something went terribly wrong. Harris wasn't just any aviation enthusiast. By June 2014, he had earned his pilot's license and was about to attempt something extraordinary, becoming the youngest pilot to circumnavigate the globe in just 30 days. But this journey wasn't merely about breaking records. It was about changing lives. He was doing something that he loved. He was doing something adventurous, his sister Heba would later say, and he was doing it for a good cause. That cause was the Citizens Foundation, a non-profit organization providing education to impoverished children in Pakistan. For Harris and his father Babar, this mission was deeply personal. Following the September 11th attacks, Babar had concluded that lack of proper education contributed to the events of that day. Their flight would raise awareness and funds for what Babar called the noblest of all causes. On June 19, 2014, with months of meticulous planning behind them, father and son departed from Plainfield, Indiana, in their single-engine Beechcraft Bonanza A-36. Harris took the controls as pilot in command, while his father handled navigation and communications. Their ambitious itinerary would take them on a 26,500-mile odyssey, with 25 stops planned across 15 countries. The journey began smoothly as they crossed into Canada, then over the Atlantic to Iceland, England, and onward through Europe. They continued through Greece, Egypt, and the UAE before reaching Pakistan, where they visited schools funded by the Citizens Foundation. The pair then pressed on through Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Australia, documenting their adventures on their blog, Around the World in 30 Days. In each location, they were greeted by supporters, media, and children whose lives would be transformed by their fundraising efforts. Harris, despite his youth, handled interviews with remarkable poise, explaining their mission with the passion of someone twice his age. By July 2014, they had completed the most challenging portions of their journey. After stops in Fiji, they arrived in Pago Pago, American Samoa, on July 22nd. They were now preparing for the penultimate leg to Hawaii, after which they would make the final push back to the United States mainland. Harris was due home in Indiana on Saturday, just days away. But fate had other plans. On that evening, shortly after takeoff from Pago Pago, their plane crashed into the Pacific Ocean. Despite both pilots wearing survival suits and having trained for water landings, the emergency beacons could only guide rescuers to tragedy. Harris's body was recovered, but his father Babar remained missing despite extensive search efforts that lasted several days. The aviation world and communities across continents mourned the loss. Though just 17, Harris had touched countless lives, and in death, his mission soared even higher. Over $1 million was raised for the Citizens Foundation, far surpassing their goal. Both he and his father Babar were posthumously awarded Pakistan's Sitara-e-Imtiaz for their humanitarian work. At Plainfield High School, where Harris was known for lifting spirits on the soccer field, a scholarship now bears his name. Harris didn't just fly to break a record. He flew to help kids go to school and have a better life. Even though he was only 17, his dream reached far beyond the clouds. Today, thousands of children are learning because of the money raised from their journey. Harris showed us that being brave isn't just about flying high. It's about using your heart to lift others up. His story will never be forgotten. It was December 5, 1931. Spectators gathered, their breath visible in the cold, as Lowell Richard Bales prepared to make aviation history in Wayne County Airport in Detroit, Michigan. His aircraft, the GB Model Z, sat on the tarmac like a bullet waiting to be fired. Stubby, powerful, and notoriously unstable, it was a machine designed for one purpose only: pure, unbridled speed. Bales wasn't always destined for the skies. Born in 1900 in the small town of Mason, Illinois, he initially pursued mining engineering at the University of Illinois, but eye trouble forced him to abandon his studies, leading him to work as an electrician in the dark Illinois mines, a far cry from the endless skies he would later conquer. His journey to aviation began with flying lessons from a World War I instructor. Bales's first plane, a surplus Curtiss JN-4, Jenny, became his pride and joy, until fate intervened when it was mistakenly blown up during a gang war in Herrin, Illinois. But nothing could keep Bales grounded for long. By 1928, Bales had partnered with H. Roscoe Britton to start a flying service in Springfield, Massachusetts. When the Great Depression hit, the Granville Brothers Aircraft Company saw air racing as their salvation. They formed the Springfield Air Racing Association, with Bales contributing $500 of his own money to secure his place as pilot of their most ambitious creation, the GB Model Z. The gamble paid off spectacularly when Bales piloted the GBZ to victory in the 1931 Thompson Trophy race, one of aviation's most prestigious events. The win made him a hero and the GB a legend, but for Bales it was just the beginning. On that fateful December day, Bales aimed to set a new land plane speed record, pushing the GBZ to its absolute limit. As he took off, the roar of the engine filled the air. Bales climbed into the sky, pushing faster and faster, the world below becoming a blur. Everything was going according to plan until suddenly, the plane pitched up violently. The right wing, unable to withstand the strain, folded like paper, the result of suspected aileron flutter. In an instant, the aircraft spiraled out of control, plummeting toward the ground at terrifying speed. Bales fought desperately to regain control, but it was too late. The GBZ slammed into the ground alongside a railroad track with such force that it exploded in a ball of fire. The impact threw Bales's body 300 feet from the wreckage, instantly killing him. Smoke from the crash could be seen for miles. Investigators later found that the crash happened because part of the plane's wing broke under the huge pressure of flying so fast. Once the wing gave out, the plane lost control and went into a deadly spin. The GBZ was built light and fast, but it wasn't strong enough to handle those extreme forces. The aviation community mourned the loss of Lowell Bales, a man who had pushed the limits of what was possible in the skies. But beneath the tributes and headlines, one truth remained: ambition had outrun caution. Bales was a symbol of daring, yes, but also of the unforgiving edge where innovation and recklessness blur. His pursuit of speed led not to lasting glory, but to a violent end. His body hurled from the wreckage of a machine never meant to be tamed. It was February 11th, 2024. The world had just begun to grasp the magnitude of Kelvin Kiptum's brilliance when everything came to a brutal, sudden stop. The same legs that had carried him to record-shattering glory, the same fire that had propelled him into legend, gave out on the grandest stage of all. The world first glimpsed Kiptum's staggering potential in December 2022. His marathon debut in Valencia was a grand event, 2 hours, 1 minute, and 53 seconds. The third fastest marathon in history at the time, and he ran it like he was out for a casual Sunday jog. Then came London, April 2023, 2 hours, 1 minute, and 25 seconds. The second fastest marathon ever run. Analysts were baffled. This kind of dominance wasn't supposed to come from someone so new to the distance. But Chicago, in October 2023, was where Kiptum transcended from prodigy to immortal. He didn't just win. He shattered Eliud Kipchoge's world record with a time that seemed pulled from science fiction. 2 hours and 35 seconds. The marathon world had a new king. With the world at his feet, Kiptum looked to the heavens. His eyes locked on Paris 2024, where the generational clash would unfold. Kiptum versus Kipchoge, the young lion against the reigning monarch. But first he had a bolder goal: to become the first man to officially break the 2-hour barrier in a sanctioned race. The Rotterdam Marathon, April 2024, was to be the site. But Kelvin Kiptum didn't want to wait. February 11th, 2024, on a quiet loop near his training base in Kaptagat, Kenya, he launched a controlled world record attempt, a private event backed by his team, certified by observers, closed to the public but open to history, wind optimized, pacers rotating in formation, nutrition calculated to the gram, a moment engineered for greatness. And for the first hour, he was poetry in motion. Splits below 2 minutes and 50 seconds per mile. Eyes focused, breathing measured. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if watching. Then came the 34th mile. A small stumble in his step. A glance sideways at his coach, Gervais Hakizimana, riding alongside on a pacing e-bike. Another half kilometer. Then something unspoken passed between them. Kiptum faltered, stumbled. Suddenly his right calf cramped violently, locking like a steel trap. He grimaced, fighting through the searing pain, but then his left ankle twisted sharply on a pothole. His foot caught unevenly against the cracked asphalt, sending him tumbling forward. What happened next was a blur of motion and sound. His body slammed hard against the unforgiving road surface and rolled multiple times down the slope. His helmet, worn for the attempt, cracked on impact, offering little protection against the brutal fall. The worst damage was to his head. The blunt trauma caused severe concussion. His right shoulder was also dislocated, the joint twisted beneath the skin. Deep abrasions covered his arms and legs, road rash searing through muscle. Medical crews positioned along the course rushed to his side. They found him unconscious, his breath shallow. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation was administered immediately. Oxygen masks pressed to his face. An ambulance sped him toward the nearest hospital, sirens screaming, but the silence inside the vehicle was a grim testament to the gravity of his injuries. By the time the helicopter arrived for an emergency airlift to Nairobi, the champion's pulse had faded into silence. He died from a brain hemorrhage. Kenya wept. The running world stood stunned. Eliud Kipchoge, his greatest rival and spiritual predecessor, issued a somber statement. A flame destined to light the future has gone dark too soon. Sebastian Coe, president of World Athletics, flew to Kenya to lay a wreath at the site where the champion fell. The cruelest irony? He was doing exactly what he was born to do. 24 years old, 3 marathons, 1 world record, and still so much unwritten. It was as if fate had waited until his name was etched into the annals of greatness before striking. It was January 24, 2016. As Worsley lay in a Chilean hospital, the Antarctic winds continued to howl across the 913 miles of ice he had conquered alone. His journey had captivated the world, but fate had other plans for this modern-day explorer who pushed human limits to their breaking point. Henry Worsley wasn't just any adventurer. At 55, this former British Army officer had dedicated his life to following in the footsteps of his heroes. Since childhood, he had been obsessed with Ernest Shackleton, and remarkably, he was a distant relative of Frank Worsley, Shackleton's captain on the famous Endurance expedition. Before his final journey, Worsley had already completed every classic route of the Antarctic explorers he revered. His fellow soldiers and explorers described him as a man of extraordinary discipline, unwavering humility, and remarkable physical and mental strength. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing history. Worsley's final mission was audacious: to become the first person to cross Antarctica solo, unsupported and unassisted, a feat that had defeated even the greatest explorers of the past. In November 2015, he set out hauling a 330-pound sled containing everything he would need to survive. No outside aid, no food drops, no kites to harness the wind, just a man against the most hostile environment on Earth. This wasn't just about breaking records. For Worsley, it was about finishing what Shackleton had started, completing the journey that his hero had failed to achieve a century earlier. It was about honoring a legacy while creating his own. The journey through Antarctica was nothing short of hellish. Worsley faced temperatures of -40 Fahrenheit, hurricane-force winds, and blizzards that reduced visibility to zero. Day after day, he trudged across endless white horizons, with nothing but his own thoughts for company. For over 70 days, Worsley lived in complete isolation, connecting with the outside world only through brief audio logs that revealed his deteriorating condition. His body was breaking down. He was losing weight rapidly. His energy was depleting and dehydration was setting in. Yet he pressed on, driven by determination and the knowledge that his journey was raising over $133,000 for wounded soldiers. On day 71, with just 30 miles separating him from the finish line and immortality, Worsley made the hardest decision of his life. In his final audio message, echoing Shackleton's famous words, he simply said, "I've shot my bolt." Exhausted beyond measure, he called for evacuation, believing that rest would restore him enough to return home safely. What he didn't know was that bacterial peritonitis had taken hold of his body, a rapid, deadly infection of the abdominal lining that can lead to organ failure if untreated. It's a condition that would prove fatal. Worsley was airlifted off the ice, first to Union Glacier, then on a grueling 2-day journey to Punta Arenas, Chile. Every hour mattered. He was fading fast, burned out from starvation, infection raging inside him. Doctors rushed him into emergency surgery, fighting to pull him back from the edge, but his body had already given everything. On January 24, 2016, Henry Worsley died of complete organ failure. The man who had marched nearly 1,000 miles alone across Antarctica had pushed beyond the limits of human endurance and never came back. Tributes poured in from around the world. Prince William, who had supported Worsley's expedition, spoke of his immense sadness. Bear Grylls called him one of the great modern-day explorers. Military leaders praised his indomitable spirit. In a cruel twist of fate, Worsley came agonizingly close to achieving his goal, just 30 miles from the finish line. But the frozen continent he revered showed no mercy. His story doesn't end with triumph, but with a grim reminder: even the noblest pursuits can end in silence and snow. In the end, the White Wasteland took not just his life, but everything he had left to give. Thanks for watching. These were more than just adrenaline rushes. They were dreams cut short in an instant. If you're drawn to true life tales where the pursuit of adventure turns deadly, click here.